Okay guys, well today I'm going to be installing a diesel heater into the Bunky caravan. I have the diesel heater here. This was straight off of the internet or eBay, something like that. It wasn't very expensive. It might have cost $250 or $300 delivered. In the past, I've always hated diesel heaters because the last one I installed, well, it stank. It just, when I turned it on, all I could smell was diesel, and that was inside the caravan. So in the past, yeah, I've absolutely hated them. But since then, I've spoken to a couple people and they've talked about the fact that you need to dial these in correctly for them to not smoke. So here I am, I'm going to give it another crack. So I thought today we'll go through the install process in this Snowy River SRT22. This will be a pretty similar installation to most caravans, but with the Snowy River being a insulated paneling, it might be a bit different to the older style timber framed caravan. But you might need to change a couple of things here and there, but for the most part, the install should be very similar. Alright, so let's take the box apart, see what we've got in here. Right away, this on top here, this is the fuel can. This holds the diesel, you can see there, it's 10 litres. It's got 3 points for screwing into, and this will most likely go on the rear bar of the caravan. Going into the box, I actually bought some extra spare parts with this. So this is a vent pipe, so this is blowing warm air towards the location you want the vent to be. Another vent pipe. This is a vent T-intersection, so it breaks one vent line into two, so you'd have a incoming air going through the face and then two different outcoming airs or something along those lines. This, I think, is the original exhaust. I actually bought a heap more because my main perspective here is that the exhaust is where the diesel smell comes out of. So if I can run that, the further away I can run it from any opening windows, being it that or the worst offender being the door, because even with it closed, you've still got the grill on the bottom there. So my idea is I'm going to try and send it back and out past the ensuite, out that back right direction. Now, keeping in mind with these caravans, they're basically way over ventilated. So for instance, we've got a vent back here. All of these are vented along here and on the outside as well. There's another vent just here. There's also another vent in the bathroom here. And then of course you've got the door vent and the vent behind the microwave. There's tons and tons of vents in here. Overkill, actually. In my opinion, overkill. It's just a standard Australian regulation. If you have a gas appliance inside a caravan, it needs to be vented like crazy, because if the gas leaks, they don't want you to die. I have actually, in my other caravan, got some white tape and taped over this vent here because we were trying to stay warm and I could feel the cold air just pouring through. Look, ventilation's good. Personally, I think they've overdone it. But my point on the back of all of this is more the fact that there's so much ventilation that when you're shooting diesel smoke out any direction, there's a chance it's going to come back in. Anyway, that's enough about that. Let's have a look what we need to install this. So going back to it, we've got the exhaust. This is the main unit here. More vent pipes here. So I actually purchased more vent pipes because the ones that the kit came with were like this. So the cupboard sits flush here. And I just thought they stuck out and they're really ugly. So I ended up buying these where they sit flush. They still have the angled slats and they still rotate. They're still adjustable. They're just more flush. The extension kit was like $40. It wasn't much. So I've got different vents. I've got the original vents. Got extra T-piece. This is all of your fittings, hose clamps, saddles, rubber mount for your motor. Instructions. This is your, I think it's just exhaust. I think that's purely for noise. You've got your fuel pickup, which we will put in the fuel tank, I believe. And then this is your fuel pump. It's on a rubber mount, so you can screw it into the chassis and it can vibrate and not be too loud. This, I do not know. Oh, I suspect this is your intake pipe. So down on the bottom of the unit here, you've got a in and an out, or an out and in, whatever's which. So one was going to be the exhaust that runs really far to the back of the caravan, and the other one, I presume they put this on. And what you want to do is probably run that sideways. You don't really want to run it backwards. You don't want to run it forwards. If you run it forwards when you're driving, you're going to use an air scoop and you'll be putting all sort of dust through it. If you run it backwards, I suspect you might create a venturi, so we'll probably end up just putting that on and zipping it just discreetly off to the side. Beyond that, you've got this. This is your fuel line. It is very narrow, but it doesn't require much fuel. Just got your wiring. And then of course you've got your screen. This is the screen that you use to program it, etc. And then on the bottom of that they've got a key remote. This I really like because you can go to sleep in your bed, wake up, you think, oh, I'm a bit cold, and all you do is push the button and it will turn on automatically. Don't have to get out of bed. Okay, and then this is the plate that goes on the bottom of this. We'll go into that in a bit more detail in a minute. Okay, so I realised before I didn't actually state where I was going to put this heater. My intention is to put it under the L-shaped lounge here. Now, I've seen some pretty clever people on the Snowy River Facebook. They're putting actually slide out drawers in here, which is pretty cool. Pretty good use of the space. But that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the heater under there. I'm going to aim to put that roughly here. I know the wheel is there. Here I've gone underneath. There's no water tanks. There's nothing underneath, so the exhaust and the air intake, everything looks pretty good. But I'll show you how to double check what you're going to hit there before you cut the big hole. And then for the outlets and inlets, I'm going to have one of the outlets like this. So I'm going to have one of the outlets, something like this, specifically angled so that it can get to all the kids in the bunk. One of the main problems I find in such a big caravan is getting the air around. You can pump hot air that way and pump hot air here, but you get cold corners. So I'm trying to angle it one towards the bed, one towards their bed, to actually circulate the air around the caravan. Okay, so to start off, this is the guy, and I want to put him in here, right? This is a position, ballpark, say I want him to be like that. First thing I'm going to do is get a tiny little drill bit, no bigger than, say, that tiny hole there, drill through the floor. Then I'm going to go underneath, and I'll be able to see exactly where I am on the underside and make sure there's no obstructions. Then the second thing I tend to do is, with a really fine drill bit, drill multiple holes all the way where you want to be, and that just makes sure there's no steel structure in the floor. I'm sure you could probably use a magnet, or there's some other way to go about it, but it's much better to do that than to cut a big hole and, you know, cut a big hole in the wrong spot. So the idea is this guy's going to go here. We've got the air intake here. This is where it sucks fresh cabin air, and then it's going to blow out this side here through some pipes. Now, first things first, I'm going to have to put a splitter in, something like that. That splitter will then run one pipe back here, which is going to go back towards the girls, and then another pipe going up that way, and that'll end up pointing towards our bed. Alright, let's get the drill bits out, see how we go. Okay, so I've got my fine drill bit. I'm just going to send one hole straight through the floor. Okay, that is sitting in there. Let's go underneath and have a look. So we're under here. You can see there's no water tanks in this section. I don't know how clear it is, but just there, that's our drill bit. It's safe to say there's nothing within 100 mil of where that is. I think this is the only steel we're really looking out for, but I'm still going to send a heap of drill holes through just to make sure. Now this is essentially our template, but it's also like a heat shield. So if we have a look, we've got one extra hole there, and that will slip over the fuel inlet right there. So that's our template. If we flip it the correct way up, that's where it's going to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole in the four corners and in the four spots here, just to give myself reference points on where everything is, and then we'll look at cutting this out. Alright, so to give you an idea, these four holes on the outside are fixing points for you to screw down to. These four here are actually to fix this plate to the heater over here. You can see the four screws there. Now I know our heater is basically going to sit between here and here, so all I'm going to do is just drill and make sure I don't find any. So that is my easy way to do that. Okay, so I'm now ready to cut the main hole. Okay, so I did see one really good tip or hack with this from Facebook again, and that is a drown spout or a pop which goes in your gutter. You got square and round. I'm probably going to use the round one, and that is just using that to cover the hole. So typically we're going to cut a hole in the floor, and then we would just have a hole around here, and that would be that. But just as an extra heat shield, I'm going to put this pop like that. This is the exhaust, this is the hot one, so I'm going to leave it the most room there, and that is just going to give the floor, which is XPS foam and fiberglass, one more heat shield and a little bit more protection. But I really like the idea. It's a perfect size, and you can just pick it up from Bunnings. Easy as. Alright, let's drill this hole. Okay, so for your reference, I have a 105mm bit here, which fits perfectly over what we're trying to drill a hole for. Now what I want to do is find a spot for this. So this front one here, that's the exhaust. So that's going to be the hot one. That's the one I want to give a little bit more room to. So I'm thinking, so it's bloody hard to gauge, but that's where I want to be, right on that mark there. Okay, now this will differ with all of you, but our floor is so thick, I've actually got to go and drill from the underside now, but you can see through, if you look through right there, you can see the ground. So we are through, but this drill bit's not big enough to punch all the way through. And that is it. There is your floor. So there you have it. That is your XPS foam in the center. You've got your fiberglass base, and look how thick that fiberglass top is there. That is the floor, and I tell you, this stuff is bulletproof. Okay, so check this out. We have our hole straight through the floor, right where we need it. Yes, you can see the swing arm below it, but that's quite a way down. It's like half a meter or so. Plenty of room for what we need. This is what we took out. Now this coloration here is just from the drill pushing the fiberglass down. But the yellow, I think it's called XPS foam, and then you've got fiberglass, and then you've got a flooring on the very top here. This is what makes these new caravans bulletproof. I really refer to all these new caravans, they're made a lot more like yachts. If you were buying a yacht, would you buy a yacht that's A, made of timber? Sure, they have their place. People like their classic yachts. B, timber and fiberglass, or timber with external cladding. Or C, just a yacht made of fiberglass. I tell you, they've been making yachts out of fiberglass for, what, 30, 40 years now? More? They got rid of the timber frame because it rotted. Guess what it does? It rots, timber rots. And I'm not having a go at timber. Timber is a beautiful product, but there are places where you want it to be used, say, like in your home, where you're guaranteed a beautiful dry environment, not in your car, not in your boat, and not in your caravan. Anyway, that's a very biased opinion there, but honestly, I believe this is the future. So now we've got the hole, we've got our gutter pop here. Look at that, it sits right down in there. And then this guy is going to sit just like that. And then we're going to screw him in just like that. First we'll bolt it up. We've got the 4 screws here. They're interestingly, normally you'd expect to have a slot so you could drive it in with a flathead screwdriver, but the 4 screws are going to go into the body. I've just taken this rubber off to make it easier. So I just realized there's actually a long thread and a short thread. This way, with the short thread going in first, you're guaranteed to bottom out that short thread, which will pull the blind part in the center as low as it possibly can go for the nut. I don't know if it's making a huge difference, but anyway, that's my plan. Okay, so they're all thread locked in. It's not dry yet, it's still drying, so I'm going to put more thread lock on this and lock down all these nuts. Keep in mind that yes, it will lock the nut to this. You can break it, but for the most part, you've got these 4 screws here, so the unit will always be accessible, and you'll be able to just undo the 4 screws and pull it out pretty easily if you need to in the future. Okay, so that is now mounted onto that. I want to put the pipes on just to make it easier so I'm not working as much on the underside. Too rigid to slip over that, so I believe what the plan is to get this fuel line here, put it over that, hose clamp to the bottom, whoops, and then slide it in that and hose clamp to that. Not the most elegant way of doing it, but I believe that's how it's done. Alright. Okay, so I've got all these hose clamps tight, and when I say tight, I can pick up the entire unit using the hose clamps. I've now got the fuel one on. I've got one of the clips down the bottom, and I've put a second one on ready to slide up to here. I've also put a black mark on the fuel line here, because you'll see as I push it in, I needed 2 hands there, but essentially you can see the black line just there. It was just too hard to figure out if it was even going in without that black line. So now I'm going to move that clip up to there, and that's ready. All of this can be poked through the floor, and I can work on the underside. And just like that, the unit's in. I've still got to get screws into the 4 positions, but I'm actually just going to leave that for now, and I'm going to go underneath and check how it looks there. So coming underneath, this is what we've got. You can see there's plenty of space around that exhaust, which is the main thing I wanted to double check. We've got the intake valve, the exhaust, and the fuel line. Now the fuel line is going to run one of 2 ways. Typically, you're going to run it right to the front to put your fuel tank on the front up there, or you're going to run it right to the back to put your fuel tank on the back. I haven't decided where I'm going to put mine. I'm thinking I'm going to put it on the back, but I haven't come to a rock solid conclusion yet. But as for the exhaust, I've already decided that exhaust I want to run backwards, pretty much as far back that direction as I can, even if it comes out under the rear bar. I don't know, something like that would be freaking awesome. Okay, so in regards to what we have to put on, this is the exhaust muffler I'm going to put on, and that is the air intake. That's just to stop bugs flying into it, I presume. So that will go on the air intake side of things with a hose clamp, and then we'll hose clamp the exhaust onto the muffler. I also found that this has an offset bracket. I have to drill it out a bit to make it work. We're going to nut onto the offset bracket, screw that into the underside of the caravan, and then I'm going to run from that this super long exhaust, which is going to get us all the way to the back of the caravan. I've only got a couple of these saddles, so we'll have to see what we make do with. I'm guessing I'll have to get some more hose clamps as well. Alright, let's go. Okay, so I'm back underneath, just double checking. I've got plenty of clearance, more than a finger of clearance the whole way around the exhaust. Now I want to run that exhaust into this muffler here. So that's just going to slot onto that, and then we'll hose clamp it on. So then I'm going to mount that up high somewhere here, out of the way of all of the suspension, of course, and then run the rest of that all the way to the back of the caravan. Okay, so what I've done is I've bent the exhaust around there, up into the muffler. I'm actually going over this part here, will be under the roof, and it's going to go above the grey water tank. Now, I know some of you are going to complain that I'm running it too close to other things, but I'm making sure it's not touching anything but metal, and it's going to have a minimum of 10 to 15 millimeters between that and any fiberglass or any plastics. Okay, so here we are. We've got the exhaust hooked up, going back, and then as you can see there, it ducts all the way to the back. We've got a bracket up in there. You can see here, it's way above the water tank, and it's underneath the floor as well. I ran all the way back, and then I zip tied it here, and before anyone has a whinge, there's stainless steel zip ties. They're not nylon. That's currently going all the way out the back, past the rear tyre, which is sort of my goal, just to get rid of the exhaust. We've got the air intake just here, which ends there. In a real world, it's not ideal because the rear wheel, you know, this is where you flick mud up, but you can see it's semi-protected above the shock tower there. That hasn't been cleaned, so you can see the mud's hit there, it's hit the top, hits the side, but just above the spring you can see it's quite clean. Okay, so before I mount the fuel tank, I thought I really want to get these vents in place. So all I've done is grabbed another hole saw. This is a 90mm hole saw. That'll drill out that hole there. I'm going to drill one there and one over there to point at that bed there. Keep in mind, this unit, yes, it blows hot air out of here, but it has to suck it in from here. So the problem I foresee is that, well, there's just not enough airflow coming in underneath this L-shaped lounge. Yes, they've got these little finger holes, but that's not really much. So what I'm probably going to end up doing is drilling a third one in here, which will actually be an intake. So we'll have one intake, which is essentially just a vent doing nothing, and then we'll have one over there and one over here, which will have the vent pipe come to it. All right, let's get drilling. All right, just gave it a bit of clean there, and there you go. Perfect fit. So, got to drill one more over there, and then we can attach this ducting on the inside. Okay, so second vent drilled, goes in, no worries. I'm now just going to screw that into place using little black screws, which did not come with it for some reason. Now I'm just going to get a hose clamp, put it over the ducting pipe like so, and then push that on, do that hose clamp up, and then I've got to run it back to the splitter and then into the unit. Okay, so most of the installation is now done. I've still got to do the wiring, but you can see my vent pipe is running back this way. I've got the other vent pipe, which is just there, also running back this way. They both meet in the middle in this T-junction, and then they go down and into the end of the unit. You could definitely make this a lot cleaner and utilize the space that you have under here, but I know personally that we don't use this space. We just chuck extra blankets and stuff down there, so I don't care that much. So all I did is I got a 8mm bit, I've drilled a little hole and then test fit this from the outside. Works perfectly. So now I need to feed it down from the inside. Let's see how I go with that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is use this random rod. I've just lightly taped it at the end and I'm going to try and feed it straight through. Here, I've got the rod on the inside. Look at that, straight through. If I grab that. The tape came back off with the rod and I've got the fitting in there. Now I need to get another little O-ring. Oh, I've got to pull that through. Put an O-ring on this side as well. And then I've got my nut. That's an O-ring either side. Okay guys, so I realised I never recorded the end of the video because I wanted to wait until I had tried it out. But essentially I mounted on the edge of the L-shaped lounge here. This is where the controller is. It's just in cool down mode at the moment. Wire runs down and then into the underside of the seat, which is of course where we mounted everything. You can see we've got the vents here. This one here pointing right. This one here in the corner, that's the return air. And then another vent here pointing towards the bunks. You can see they are swivelable. And I really just didn't want to record this part of it until I'd tried it out, because I really hated our last diesel heater. But you'll be happy to know that this new one is awesome. It made camping, free camping in a colder climate doable. Where we'd been to Queensland tons of times and free camped, but the climate's so nice that you don't really need a heater anyway. One time we went to Melbourne, however, and I think it was like 3 degrees. It was freezing. But in my opinion, I genuinely think you would have been warmer in a swag, because that swag keeps so much heat in. But with all the ventilation through these caravans, we could feel the ice pouring through all the vents. It was a very, very cold night. So for that type of thing, if you're going to Melbourne, South Australia, or just anywhere south that does get colder at night, or if you're just a cold person and you like to be warmed up, this diesel heater is an absolute win. Now the big difference with the installations is where I pointed the exhaust. With the first one, I used the original exhaust, which is very short, and I shot it straight out the side of this window here, which is not far from that vented door. And we just smelled diesel smoke the whole time. We could not use it. We would choke out inside the cabin. The new one is run all the way to the back and out off the back rear bar there. It's mounted really well. Didn't have any issues. Didn't smell any diesel at all. I'm really, really happy with it. And the craziest thing to me is the amount of diesel it used. I think we might use like less than 500 mil of diesel in a full night. So with a 10-litre tank, you're talking about 20 nights on a single tank. That's super efficient. Alright guys, well if you have any questions about this install, put them in the comments, or if you want to see more information on the caravan, if you want to see how I installed the inverter, let me know and I'll make a video of that. Thanks for watching.